Hey, how's it going? I'm going to be coloring this live in just a second. Just got to get everything up and running here. Give me one moment. All right, great. So it looks like I'm live on YouTube, and let me just check out Twitch here for just a moment. All right, great. So I'm live on YouTube and Twitch right now. I'm going to be coloring this psychedelic illustration in Photoshop and probably a little bit in Manga Studio as well. If any of you guys are watching this on YouTube and you're Twitch subscribers, it'd be great if you could go over and subscribe to my channel because I'm real new there and I think I've only got a couple of followers. It's Twitch TV/Flyland Designs. Any questions that you have for me, just submit them on YouTube in the comments, and I'd be happy to answer. If you have any questions on Facebook, you can go ahead and leave it in the comments, and I'll try to come back later and answer them. And I'm going to start drawing in just a moment here. Just got to get something figured out. Hmm. Let's see. Hey, sorry for the delay. I'm getting one thing worked out. Just bear with me one second. Where'd they go? All right, sweet. Okay, apologize for the delay. Let's get started. So this is a psychedelic piece I'm working on for a client, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's actually inspired by a Beatles album cover. Let me try to bring that up so we can see what we're looking at. So you may remember this cover. Really cool. I don't know the name of the artist offhand, but it's just awesome artwork. And we wanted to do something loosely inspired by that. So really the only thing we really kept was this idea of the four-handed monk with the sitar here and the cool fabric. Everything else I kind of went a little nuts in my own style. And I chose to color this in Photoshop instead of Manga Studio, which is what I typically work in, just because sometimes I find that when I'm trying to do really, really colorful things with lots of fades and gradients, that Photoshop just handles that color mixing better. I wish I could do it in Manga Studio because I find Manga Studio to be a lot more user-friendly than Photoshop. So you may see me stumble a bit when I'm like trying to do keyboard shortcuts that I'm not used to here, but here we go. So first step I did was after inking, I went in and put flat colors. I skipped that part in the video because it's a little boring to watch, but that actually is a pretty important stage because I made a lot of color decisions on what the actual piece is going to look like. These colors are going to change a little bit, but this is basically the direction I want to go in. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and put color holds on some of this line art here. So anything that has an effect on it. And I kept those all on their own layers, so it's real easy to do. And I find if you do this, just coloring the line art, before you even start rendering, it already starts to make your piece look pretty complete. So it can save you a ton of time and make things look a little bit less flat. And this is especially useful for background elements, like this guy here. Okay, what else? Yeah, this, I want to color this as well. I think anything in the background, I'm going to change the line art color. Sorry. See, I'm used to Manga Studio's shortcuts, so things are going to be a little nuts here. Alright. I think that's good. I think I'm going to keep the character's lines black, but I might go in later and change the color of his skin to like a dark pink for the line art there. So, what I like to do first is go in and, before I really start rendering, is get a soft brush and start putting in just a lot of color fades and gradients. So we're going to grab a soft brush here. I do not know why that keeps happening. Hey Maria, thanks for watching and thanks for the compliments. I appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, just go ahead and type them into the chat, and I'll try and respond. If I miss a question, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's just sometimes it can be hard to look up and draw at the same time. So if I miss it, just go ahead and ask it again. And I'm gonna hop over to Manga Studio real quick because now that I have some of my gradients down and the colors selected, I find it a lot easier to color in Manga Studio. I'm having some kind of issue with one of my shortcuts that's driving me nuts, and I can't mess around with it right now. So let's open that up. Bear with me 1 second. While I'm opening this up, I actually just recently bought the new iPad. It's the iPad 10.5 inch, the new iPad Pro. Um, I've been excited about that for like all year really, and I wanted to buy one, and I kept waiting and waiting because I knew they were going to come out with a new one soon. Because a few friends of mine use the iPad Pro with the iPad Pencil, um, and they do amazing things. So anyway, I got it, and I'm still trying to give it a chance, but I might even return it. I've got until Tuesday to return it because I don't know. It's just not what I wanted it to be, I guess. Um, and I'm not sure why that is because, like I said, I've seen people do some amazing things. Um, but for some reason, it just does not feel like drawing on paper or drawing on the Wacom. It's just something completely different. And it might be that I'm just not used to it yet, but when I'm drawing on it, it's not. So here's the problems that I'm finding. It's not powerful enough or not flexible enough to be like this, like working with the Wacom and the Mac, right? I can't use Manga Studio, so you're just using apps like Procreate and stuff. And those are great apps, but there's still so many things that I want to do that I can't. Um, then on the other side of that, it doesn't quite feel like drawing on paper either. It's pretty close, but most of the times that I've been using it, I've just realized to myself, it's like, well, why don't I just get out a piece of paper then and just draw on a piece of paper? So to me, it's sort of like I just bought an $850 sketchbook, and it doesn't even do all the things that I want it to do. So it might be going back. So that leaves the question of what the heck do I do now? Am I just going to stick with my big Cintiq here, and then I use my sketchbook when I'm out? It's definitely a possibility. Do I go and buy like the $2,000 Wacom Mobile Studio? I could definitely do that, though I had the first companion, the Wacom Companion 1, and I used that for many years. I liked it, but I ended up selling it to somebody else because I just ended up not using it that much. So it was a bit of a waste. Also heard a lot of good things about Surface Pro, but I have the same sort of hesitation about that. It seems like some of the flexibility is going to disappoint me. I don't know. These are the things that keep me up at night. Hey, whoop-de freaking do. I like your screen name. So I'm getting a recommendation from you for the mobile studio. Um, oh, you've been wanting one. So have you heard good things about it? Uh, it looks like it looks amazing compared to the one I had, which was the Companion One. One of the problems with the Companion One is that you couldn't connect it to your computer to actually be used as a Cintiq, um, which that was really shitty because I have a nice laptop uh, that I would take on vacation, and that's what was missing was the ability to just plug it in somewhere to have that option. So that's one thing I was looking forward to. Um, with the iPad Pro, you can plug it into your Mac and use it just like a Cintiq. You have to download a special app to do that called Duet Pro. Um, and I tried it this morning, and it's the same kind of thing. Like it just felt, I must be so used to this. You know, it just must be part of my body now. Because when I was trying to mess around with it, it just didn't feel. I could not get the strokes that I needed. You know, um, maybe if I gave it a bit more time, I don't know. Yeah, I did hear that the battery life on the Mobile Studio Pro was not great, and that's what when I had the first companion, that's what I experienced too. You're really only going to get like 3 hours out of it, whereas the iPad Pro, um, that thing will last probably like a day and a half, I think. Uh, the thing is that actually didn't end up being a problem for me because normally when I would use it, actually, I would just plug it in. Um, because I would be on the couch or something, and of course, you don't always want to plug it in, but there I was never really using it in a place where I was that far from a plug, you know. So right now I'm just using this textured brush that I have that I created called Tasty Shading, and if you zoom in, it's really it's just got a bit of texture and tooth to it that you can't really see unless you zoom way in. Um, but I really like it as opposed to just using a soft brush because it blends better and it does kind of add a little bit of organicness to the piece. So what I like to do first here before I draw any shadows is go in and tackle some of the color variations and some of the highlights. Not all of them, but not the like brightest highlights, but just a few. Hey, I have a question here asking how do I make or how do I price my artwork? Um, so that's a really great question, and it's one I actually struggle with all the time. I'm going to be making a video soon on how to handle all that, or how I handle it anyway. Um, what you want to do as an artist is I've actually been adopting the method of like a tattoo artist or a dentist and let me explain. Um, you have to stop looking at your artwork as a product that you sell, more of somebody is booking or paying for your time. They're booking your time, right? Um, so what happens eventually is that once you've been doing this for a couple years, is that you'll start to get booked up for longer and longer periods. You'll start to realize that okay, well, if I take this job now, it means that I can't do this other job. Um, so if that's the case, then your time is now a premium that somebody needs to pay for. Okay, so a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, "Hey, I love your artwork, but I don't have a lot of money. But you can produce something. You can do something with less detail, so that should cost me less." They're looking to get a discount if I do something with a little less detail that will take less time, right? I never do that because there's almost no such thing as a quick piece of artwork. Every client requires a sort of a block in your schedule. Even if the job really only took me 2-3 hours, which is pretty rare, you still need all this time to research the product, to invoice, to talk with the client. So the way, and I know it's taken me a long time to answer your question, but it is a complicated thing. So what I started doing was, if I am booked up, let's say for a month, that means when another person asks me for a quote, I raise my price. And you just keep doing that and keep doing that until you get too many people saying no. When too many people say no and you start running out of work, then you need to bring your prices down. So you absolutely should price on your current demand. Look at your schedule. If you're in a position where you have enough work and enough money to take you through a certain period of time, then that's when you should start taking risks and start pricing higher and higher. And I always encourage people to price higher, not because I think we should all be, money grubbing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the more money you get for a piece, the more time you can spend on it, the more comfortable you are, the less you're panicking, and then the artwork becomes much, much better. My artwork now is way better than it was 3 years ago, because I was having to cram, I was having to cram tons of projects into a week just to pay the bills, and now we're past that point, and once you get past that point, your artwork becomes better, and then that attracts better clients, that attracts people with bigger budgets, and it just keeps growing and growing and getting better and better. And one last thing about that. So you do need to understand how much time a piece will take you. And I use a piece of time tracking software called Toggle. It's free. It's really nice. And basically, over time, you start to learn that, okay, most logos take me about 8 hours. So you can then block off like a day and a half for a client to do that. And that's what the day and a half is actually the formula I kind of usually use. Most projects require a sketch, an ink, and a color, and each of those things usually take me like half a day. I always say half a day, but then I end up trying to cram 3 things into a day. But that's typically how it works. And you just figure out what you need to make in a day, and then that's how you get your number. So find that baseline number, and then just keep raising it up as your demand rises. All right. So I'm going to, let me go and just quickly grade in some of these things here. And I'm sorry, I probably ignored a lot of questions when I was on that rant. What do we have here? Let me just look back. Hey, I see a comment that Dan Mumford is doing some art on the iPad Pro. And that's funny you say that. He's a major inspiration of mine. I have one of his signed prints in my office here. And that's what was disappointing about my first impression with the iPad Pro, is that it's like there are so many great artists that are doing amazing things with it, that I'm almost confused why it's not working for me. And I'm trying. I have until Tuesday to take it back. So what I'm doing is really trying to give it a good chance. But as I said, like I've already got my Wacom. I'm just wondering if I should just get back to using a regular sketchbook on paper, because there is a lot of value to that. The disadvantage, of course, to drawing digitally is that you don't have any originals to sell. And I don't do a lot of that, but I think someday I might. Someday when I'm older and closer to retirement, my wife and I might do art shows and things, and it'd be kind of nice to have a big stack of little sketches and things that I could sell. Hey, there's a question here. So asking, why am I coloring in Photoshop over Clip Studio? At the beginning of this video, I started laying down the base colors in Photoshop uh, for two reasons. One, I feel like the hue saturation tools work faster and more accurately in Photoshop, and also the big soft brushes and gradients seem to work better. It could be my imagination. So I like to take it into Photoshop and lay down the base colors, and then I open it in Manga Studio and start coloring things and finishing up. And usually then I take it back into Photoshop again and do some final adjustments. So even though I definitely use Manga Studio for 90% of my work, I think every piece visits Photoshop at some point in some capacity. Alright, so what I'm going to start doing, I'm going to start actually doing some rendering here. Well, let me just color these things. James Marno asked a really great question here. The question is, do your skills improve more over time when creating professional work for clients, or do they improve more with personal projects that you yourself want to work on? I unfortunately sometimes don't make enough time to work on personal projects. I recently started making a pact with myself to every month create a new piece or a new little series, and I've been doing pretty well with that. The personal artwork is so important for your growth because I find that I'm way more likely to experiment if it's on my own dime. If I'm just doing it for me and there's not that pressure of the client, I'll experiment a lot more. And then, of course, not having the client in your way makes for some awesome possibilities because as important as clients are, unfortunately, most of them, unless they are accomplished art directors, which most of my clients are not, a lot of their input is going to hurt your piece. And I unfortunately have tons of stuff in my portfolio that I think is almost great. Like it could have been great if the client hadn't crowbarred something that shouldn't be in the piece into the piece anyway, you know? Or sometimes, and I'm sure everybody's been here, where you get super excited about an idea and you pitch it to your client and they're just not willing to take the risk with you, even though you know that it's probably going to work out fine. Sometimes they play it too safe, and that creates less fulfilling artwork. On the other hand, though, if all you're doing is pieces for yourself, you may be hurting yourself as well, because there is a ton of experience to be gained from working with somebody else, because someone else is going to have a perspective that you aren't going to see. They are also going to throw you challenges that you may have avoided, and I was talking about playing it safe. A lot of times you play it safe with yourself. I mean, I do this all the time. If I'm bad at drawing muskrats, I'm probably not going to sit down and paint a muskrat. But if somebody calls me up and hires me to do a muskrat, I can't say no, you know. And so far, no one has hired me to draw a muskrat. So I don't know if that means I need more in my portfolio or what. A lot of honey badgers. I've drawn a hell of a lot of honey badgers. Somebody recently who was watching one of my YouTube videos left a comment that they think I have too many brushes and that I should clean them up. And I hope that made their day better. I can't think of why else you'd want to share that. Something is happening here, and I don't know what. Oh. Oops. I actually don't like that. All right, so I just got to color these columns real quick, and then I can get into some rendering. A lot of this was drawn using the symmetry tool, so like everything I drew on this side appeared on this side. But when I color, I like to not have that on because it's sort of like the last chance to keep it from looking too symmetrical. You know, if things are just a tiny bit varied, it will look a lot more interesting, I think. Hey, well, thanks a lot, James. I appreciate that. Somebody made the comment here that all of us artists need more camaraderie, and I think that's what's so awesome about being an artist in our industry is that for maybe this isn't a good thing for our careers, but most artists that I've talked to are really forthcoming and friendly and are willing to share a lot. Um, and I just can't imagine that in almost any other industry. Like I can't imagine at like a lawyer convention if they have those um, that people are walking around just sharing insider information and tips and encouraging each other and stuff. Most industries are probably a lot more careful of what they divulge, um, and and I'm really thankful for that because I've learned so much just from talking one-on-one to other artists or watching their YouTube channels. Um, it's very cool, and I think it makes us all better because one of the reasons I'm always trying to improve is really not really to impress clients, but just to impress my peers and my friends. All right, so what I want to do here, now that I got most of this down, is I'm going to make a new layer set to multiply, and this is just going to kind of be the shadows. Well, it's not going to kind of be; it is going to be. And what I want to do is want to get something that's kind of purple. It's more blue. Oops. Yeah, I think that'll work. So what I like to do, I have a 100% ink brush created by Zombie Yeti that he was giving away for free. And it's just got a rough edge to it, like that. And I like to just go in and very quickly put in shadows. And then in areas where it needs to be softer, I'll just go back in and erase those areas. I used to work in the like comic book, make a lasso selection and then airbrush in that selection a lot more than I do now. Um, but I found this technique kind of achieves the same effect, but is a lot faster. And what I like about it is to me it feels a bit more like artwork because I like the lines. You know, that's what I like, line art. I like seeing the strokes. Hey man, how you doing? Again, thanks for all the questions. If I missed any of your questions, just please ask again because it's hard to scroll back up through them. Now these hard shadows, I'm only going to put them on the figure most likely because I want the focus to be on him. And then after I do this, I'm probably going to go back in and make some kind of rim light from the back. The other thing I'll do in Photoshop later is when I'm all finished, is kind of put in some effects. So I'll probably get some glow effects on the eyes and things like that. And with this stage, since I already took a lot of time on the line art, you don't have to be real precise, which I enjoy about this stage because it's already there. You're just sort of tracing along the lines and adding the midtone. Basically, that's all we're doing right now. Is we're basically just adding the midtone. Oh yeah, and I usually like to do this. I usually like to have a second window here showing me the whole thing. I forgot to do that. I have a question here. Do you use texture brushes a lot? Um, how much do you apply to an illustration? I do like texture brushes because I like a look that's less digital if I can help it, um, and I think that sort of loosens it up a bit. But you got to be careful because I've used them too much before, and it ends up um, just making everything muddy. So to answer your question here, when I did this shading, I used a texture brush. It's one of my brushes called Tasty Shading that I like a lot. But what you want to do when you use them is you don't want to use it everywhere because if I colored everything with this in the picture with the same texture, it makes the skin the same texture as the bone, as the snakes, as the metal, and it just you lose some of the realism that way. So I have a question here. Do you know any good tutorials for making digital art and Clip Studio look traditional? Um, I don't. You'd have to Google that one. Most of the artists I follow are more similar style to mine, like kind of a comic book uh, graphic look that you can cartoony kind of stuff. Um, it's not that I don't. Highly respect traditional artists, but it's just not like the kind of art I hang up in my house that I'm into. So it's just not really something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. if you're really looking for a traditional look, maybe Clip Studio Paint isn't the right program for you. Maybe you should look at Corel Painter. Or we were talking earlier about the iPad Pro and Procreate. All right, so with this, now that I have these shadows on a separate layer, what I can do is lock the transparency for a second and then go over this in a darker color in some areas. That's too dark. All right, let's do the skin. I have a question here. First of all, thanks for the compliments. How do you and where do you promote yourself? I talk a little bit about this. I can't remember or not if I have something on this on my website. I have a frequently asked questions section on flylanddesigns.com that you can check out. Bear with me one second. There we go. I try to promote myself everywhere. I mean, I know that doesn't really help, but you can't depend on only one source because things change so fast. I'll give you an example. There is a site called Behance, which is still a really good site, and I promote myself there a lot. But it used to be 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that I would post something and it would just go crazy with the amounts of clicks and likes and you know, the more likes you get, the more it's shown, right? What happened was when Adobe Cloud or Creative Cloud came with Behance, like they partnered, there were now so many people on Behance that it became a little like DeviantArt, where there's so many art. There's like probably thousands uploaded per minute, maybe more. I don't know. That my views started dropping drastically, and when that happened, I started getting less and less clients from it. I still participate in it, but it's not as useful as it once was. So that's a good example of something where if you depend on one thing too much, you're setting yourself up for failure because these things change so fast. But I like to promote myself on Instagram. I don't get a ton of high quality clients from Instagram. It's unfortunately a lot of people who don't really have a real budget, but that's not to say that I've never gotten anything from there. But otherwise, you just need to keep your website current, and eventually you'll reach a point where you have enough existing clients and repeat clients that you will have to depend on new clients less, and that'll allow you to be to raise your prices and also to not stress out so much. But that takes a while. Hey, what's up, Poland? I was talking earlier about how I used to use the lasso cut method where you draw the shape of your shadow and then fill it in with an airbrush. I really like this method much more, where I'm just brushing the shadows and then I can go back and erase or smooth them as needed, because well, first of all, it's much quicker, and second, like, I just feel like it ends up looking more like a piece of art to me. It reminds me of drawing on paper and using like a Copic brush to do shadows and things. Now, the lasso cut comic book method, that is really useful for doing something where you really want to make it look realistic, But this piece is not supposed to be realistic, so it works fine for it. Znort Designs asked me, what's my favorite piece that I've done through the years? That's a great question, man. So I would say one of my there's two answers to this. My favorite, as in, what's the piece that I think was my best work, or that is kind of like perfect and that there's nothing I would change, is probably this Dead and Deader zombie tribute I did to Dumb and Dumber. I sell it on T-shirts, and it's basically just Lloyd and Harry as zombies, and I love it. And I did that as a personal piece just for the heck of it. As far as like client work, like favorite projects, probably one thing that I'm most proud of recently is this alien drawing of the alien queen for the official Alien pinball machine. It's still not released yet. They're having some issues, but that was something that I put everything I had into it, and I was real happy with it. And I was also happy that it was actually official work. It's licensed from Fox, and H.R. Giger was one of my favorite artists growing up, so it's cool to work with his property. Other than that, I was lucky to do something for Activision for the Call of Duty Zombies game. That's also one of my favorite projects. They had me draw a bunch of the zombie characters for the new 80s themed zombie game. What is that called? I think Zombieland or something. No, not Zombieland. What is it? Any Call of Duty fans here? Anyway, that was a lot of fun. And I was happy with how it turned out. I was mostly happy because they didn't hire me to just draw like a realistic rendering of one of their 3D models. Like, they wanted me to draw their characters in my style, so they liked my kind of 80s detailed, gross, cartoony style, and that's what they wanted. So that's what I did, and it came out pretty cool, I think. Other than that, as far as favorite projects, sometimes some of the things that are the most fun are just things that don't have as much pressure connected to them. So it could be just like a vaping label for somebody's small business for their e-juice or something like that. And if we can just really get in there and have some fun with it, sometimes that's where I create my best work, which is kind of funny. Sometimes the bigger clients, it becomes difficult to do your best work, even though you want to. There's sometimes a committee involved, so you've got lots of people making decisions that maybe they shouldn't, and it's also they're very risk averse. So, and sometimes too you buckle under the pressure. So if there's more at stake, then sometimes I'll play it safe, and just, if they liked a piece of my portfolio previously, I'll just do something like that, and which is fine, and they like it, and it gets the job done and gets me paid, but maybe I didn't really blaze any trails with that one. I don't know. Hey, thanks. Talking about my um, Toy Story parody. I like doing that stuff a lot too, where I take like a known property like Toy Story and then just draw the characters a little more or a lot more extreme and crazy. The trouble with that work is that you got to be careful you don't become known for that, I guess, or you don't want clients to think that's all you do because it can look unprofessional. So I try to keep that out of my portfolio, or at least not everywhere in my portfolio. Yeah, thanks. A compliment about my Rick and Morty T-shirt. I forgot about that one. That probably would be my favorite, actually, because that was one I put everything into, and that was an interesting scenario because um, that was a contest. So I did that basically with no art direction and just of my own motivation. And that's not something I typically do. I don't join a lot of contests because, to be honest, I'm not really sure how I feel about them. But luckily, so anyway, I had a free day, so I just figured I would sit down and do it. You know, because it's my favorite show, my favorite cartoon show right now, Rick and Morty. So I did it, and I was one of the winners, which was really great. It was surprising because my style is so different. Um, I didn't think they were going to go for that. I thought they were going to play it safer. And what's cool is it's for sale on Hot Topic, like really all over the world. I'll get emails still every week or every couple weeks with people saying that they're from Poland or they're from Russia or whatever, and they're wearing my Rick and Morty design. Um, that's the good news. Bad news is since it was a contest, I got paid barely anything for that. Um, and actually, I recorded a little video I'm going to post soon on my YouTube channel, sort of talking about that. Um, but the company that produced that shirt, they actually called me shortly after, and they said like this shirt ended up being really popular. We want to hire you to do another one, and so I said, great, that's awesome. But when we started talking pricing, the price that they wanted uh, was just insanely low. I mean, I won't go into what the price was, but it was too low. There are times when I will take a hit on pricing if I think like if we can work out a different type of deal. And I tried everything. I tried working out like a royalty deal. I tried working out promotional deals, whatever. They wouldn't have it. They would have nothing. So unfortunately, I had to walk away from that. Um, but sometimes you got to do that, I guess. It just that was a bummer. T-shirt market. If there's any designers here who work in the T-shirt market, man, it's tough because even when you're working with large brands, it can be difficult to make profit on T-shirts unless you're selling tens of thousands. Um, if you get a client who's just printing 100 shirts, most of the time, if you're going to charge kind of a respectable rate, they might not even be able to break even. Like it may not be a good call for them to even hire you sometimes. Um, so I don't know. It's very tricky, and it's also tricky because there are a lot of people out there in the industry that are just charging like a couple $100 for a design, and that makes it very hard to compete. So I've been actually trying to do more and more stuff that's not T-shirts, um, and having success with that. Yeah, Christopher Lovell was brought up. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. He's a fantastic artist. I think he uses Photoshop. He draws in pencil first on paper and then colors it in Photoshop, if I remember correctly. He's one of these artists that, like, if you look at his, follow him and look at his channel, he's sort of like blended the, he's almost a celebrity in a way. I don't know. I don't have the face for that. Um, okay, there's a good question here. Do I have any problems regarding the copyright on some of the commercial characters that I've designed? Uh, yeah, I have gotten. Well, I have gotten a cease and desist once. I can talk about that in a second. But normally, I do not try to sell any licensed characters. The closest I will get is if it's a very obvious parody. And I was talking earlier about the Dumb and Dumber thing. Um, to me, I think I would be safe there because the characters, first of all, they're drawn as zombies. Um, it doesn't use any of the original text. It doesn't use any like photos from the movie. I'm not even drawing scenes from the movie. And the definition of parody is basically, and I'm not a lawyer, guys. Okay, so don't take any of this as actual legal advice. But the definition of parody, to my understanding, is that if a reasonable person can look at it and not confuse it with the actual product, then you're okay. If you do something where a person might think, oh, that's actually from the movie, or that's actually sanctioned by whoever does Dumb and Dumber, I don't know, whatever studio, then you might get into more trouble. And I don't know how, there's so many artists that seem to just get away with this constantly. Like if you go to any of these t-shirt sites, let's say like T-Fury, for example, or Designed by Humans, which I'm on. I have my stuff on those sites. So much of that stuff, I mean, I would say almost all of it is pop culture parodies, and some of them get really, I don't know, into the gray area, right? I don't know how they get away with it. So I try to stay away from it. The time I got in trouble was I did a. Well, it's funny. I'm actually wearing it right now. Try to adjust my camera. Bear with me while I mess with this camera here. So I did this Godzilla shirt. Here. He's weightlifting, and it says God's Gym, and he's weightlifting with two buildings. Pretty groundbreaking stuff, I know. So I got, oh, Jesus, I just rolled over my dog. So I got in trouble for that because I submitted that design to Shirtwoot. And if you've ever seen Shirtwoot, every single thing they do is a pop culture parody. Every single thing. They even told me that because I submitted some original work, and they were like, yeah, we love your work, but do you have anything that's like pop culture stuff? Because that's kind of what we do. I submitted it to them, and my mistake was when I made that design, I used the actual Gold's Gym font because I wanted it to look like that. And that was a mistake because as soon as it went up for sale on their site, I got a cease and desist FedEx to my door. Some guy delivered it, and it was from Gold's Gym. And I was absolutely freaking out because this is my full-time job. I support my whole family with this. The last thing I need is a freaking lawsuit. I don't have the time to defend anything in court. So, but I shouldn't say that. in case somebody has an idea. But anyway, I contacted Shirtwoot, and I was freaking out, and I said, "What the heck? What are we gonna do?" Because they want me to pull this design, and they're threatening to sue for damages. They told me, he said, "We're not gonna pull it unless you really want us to, because we think it is a legitimate parody. We do these all the time, and these companies send us cease and desist constantly, but they never follow through on them." So we didn't take it down, and that was the end of it. I never heard back from Gold's Gym. Nothing ever happened. So I believe what happens a lot of times is they probably have whole staff that just, their job is just to browse the internet, find instances of their properties, and they just instantly mail out a cease and desist kind of before even like talking to their lawyers or legal team. And in most cases, that probably scares people off, and that's the end of it. If it's not the end of it, if somebody has an objection to it, then they probably forward it to their legal department and go from there. So I don't know. I think I might have been fine anyway. But that was the only time I've gotten in trouble, and it taught me the lesson that if you want to avoid trouble, definitely don't use the actual font of the property that you're parodying. Okay. It's funny you mentioned Felix LaFlame. He's one of my favorite artists, and a really nice guy too. I've reached out to him a couple times, and he's helped me out. I don't know what kind of method he uses actually. I know he uses Photoshop. I think he would actually really get a kick out of Manga Studio. I'm always trying to push that. All right. The thing I did last time I did one of these live streams is I just kept going and going for way too long. So let me just record maybe for another 15 minutes. So let me look around here. I'm not going to be able to finish this today, but it's getting, I mean, I will finish it today, but not on the stream. It's getting fairly close to finished, but what I'll do right now is go in and let's color his skin for one. If anybody has any last minute questions, please put them through, because I'll probably only be streaming for another 15 minutes. Yeah, I was talking Somnivores. You say, unfortunately, Felix stopped drawing teas, and I was talking to him about this, and because I saw that too, and I was wondering, a lot of these guys, a lot of my peers and my friends, you'll see sometimes that they draw things or draw T-shirts for like famous bands. You know, you'll see something for the Foo Fighters or for Korn or whatever, and you look at that and you say, man, these guys must be killing it. You know, why can't I be there? Why can't I do that and make thousands of dollars per design and whatnot? Once you sit down and talk to these guys, you realize that the music T-shirt or music apparel industry is a rip-off. I don't even, now I do T-shirts for bands, but I don't like try to promote that, and I don't go after music apparel marketing companies, because the way that most of these guys work is they will hire a pile of artists. So they'll hire like 5 artists to do shirts for Ozzy, let's say. And then they take the designs to Ozzy. He picks the ones he wants. Maybe he doesn't want any of them. And they then only pay, they pay the full amount only to the artists who got picked. So I have a friend who does work for just huge bands. I mean, you would know all of them, right? And I think he gets paid only, I think it's like $250 to design the shirt, and then if it gets picked, he gets another $250. So it's like $500 to do a piece of artwork that can take you a lot of time, and this will be sold all over the world to who knows how many fans. So that I believe is why Felix does not do that anymore, and I'm glad he doesn't, because he's a fantastic artist, and all of us deserve to be paid way more than that, especially when working with something that is going to be used that widely. You know, it's really a shame, and I don't know what happened there. I guess it's just there's so many artists who are lined up wanting to do work for their favorite band that it just drove the prices into the gutter. Um, anyway, man, I could talk absolutely forever about pricing. Uh, it's a really complicated thing. If you're struggling with it, just know that we are all struggling with it. And the best thing that you can do is or that any of us can do, is just never settle for the current prices you're getting. Just constantly, every year, try to grow, grow, grow. Um, and if you're stuck in an industry where the prices have been the same for years and years, then start looking elsewhere. Don't design only in one industry. Um, I'm trying to think of an example. Probably a good example would be the music industry, or maybe like card games. Um, I know that unless you're like a top level Magic the Gathering artist, you're not going to make a lot per card. And they also have insane payment terms too. Like I've seen some things from Tops where they won't pay you unless the design is used, and sometimes the design may not even be used for 90 days. So you may design something and not even see a dime until 90 days later, and that's only if they end up using the artwork. So that's an industry I stay away from as well. Okay, let me see some questions here. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name, but you're asking, I have a lot of videos about inking and coloring. Can I please make a video about how to compose artwork and basic sketching? So that's a really good idea. I didn't think anybody would be that interested in that. Um, so maybe I will try to put that together eventually. And I want to say to anybody who follows me, I know sometimes I say I'm going to make this video eventually, and then a lot of times I don't. And I'm really sorry about that. It's just, you got to understand, this is my full-time job here, and sometimes I just get so busy that making the video just continues. I have to push it off, and it never happens. And I'm sorry about that. But unfortunately, there's only one of me. And those videos, you wouldn't believe it, but they take a long time to make and to edit together. That's why I'm liking doing these live streams, because I'm here and I'm working anyway, and this isn't something I'm going to have to edit. Of course, it may not be as helpful, but it's better than nothing, I hope. For these wings, I'm going to do the lasso cut method, because that will help sort of the soft look of the feathers. Okay, let's see. Looking for final questions here. Someone's asking, or Shane is asking, the name of the book that I learned about how to ink from. Maybe you're thinking of video. There's a workshop called the Gnomon Workshop, GNOMON, and I got a video, a DVD. This was a long time ago. This was before YouTube was a thing, and they mailed me this QuickTime DVD that doesn't even work anymore. Actually, it might have been a CD-ROM. It's probably a CD-ROM. Anyway, I'm old. It was by Steve Furchow, a famous comic book inker. And it wasn't digital. It was all traditional inking. But just by watching that, I feel like I learned a lot from it. Otherwise, I learned a lot from watching YouTube videos. When you watch them from some of my peers, for example, Beast Pop, I'm sure you're familiar with his artwork. He's a favorite of mine. I would watch some of his videos, and you just pick up subtle things, like what size brush they're using, and another thing that's really helpful to see and really helpful to learn is what the brush strokes look like close up, right? Because when you see an image really small on the web, it's easy to imagine that and think that every stroke must be perfect, you know? But when you zoom in and look at the strokes, they're really far from perfect. So that kind of knowledge can really help you sort of get confidence in yourself, and that's a good thing. So let's see. All right, let's see. Are there any final questions? I'm about to sign off. Do I look at reference pictures? Yes, absolutely. I might even be too dependent on reference material, but as I'm coloring this, I haven't been looking at reference. Sometimes I will if there's like a color scheme that I really like. While I was inking it, maybe a little bit of reference, but when I first drew it, I first spent about 20 minutes just gathering some cool examples of psychedelic art. So I got some ideas from that. I have a skull on my desk that I got from Amazon here. Pretty cool. My kids drew all over it, but that's really helpful. Reference, I think, is if you're struggling, spend some time before each piece, like 10 minutes, to just gather a little folder of reference material. Your comment here, I always feel like you're cheating. The people who say that it's cheating, they're probably just angry at their own development level. I never got that. I mean, the masters who painted things, they painted them, when you see like a beautiful meadow or a person, they painted it by looking at a person, or they painted it outside. So the idea that you have to sit down and just draw everything from your head is crazy to me. And what it'll do is it'll limit you. I know that when I sit down and try to just draw from my head, which is a good exercise too, so don't neglect that. But when I do that, I end up drawing kind of the same stuff over and over again. Sometimes you need that reference or the inspiration to kind of kick you into drawing something that you wouldn't even have thought of. All right, and let's see, am I missing any questions? All right, cool. Well, actually, this is a good place to stop. The next step is I'm just going to take this back into Photoshop, and I want to add some effects and do some extra things here. I have to put one more level of highlights into this, but I don't want this to drag on forever. So I really appreciate everybody who was watching, and here, let's see. I really appreciate everyone who watched and asked questions. I'm going to try to do this every Friday. So please check back. If you guys have a Twitch account, if you could go follow me on Twitch, that'd be excellent, because I'm new there. And if you have any feedback on how the video went or how I could improve it, just leave me a comment and I'll check it out. All right, thanks.